Hi, everybody. Welcome to this episode. And on this episode, I'm delighted to say that we have probably Ireland's best known driving instructor. And I'm not talking about myself. I'm talking about Mr. YouTube. If you Google or if you check YouTube for driving lessons or the driving test in Ireland, there's one name will come up and there are a huge amount of videos and they're all absolutely fantastic. So I reached out to him and I was delighted when he said, yeah, Sean, I'd love to talk to you. We're going over to Wexford to talk to Dane Tyghe. Hello, Dane. How are you?
Hello, Sean. It's good to be with you. Thanks for having me.
Do you like my backdrop? This is the new bridge coming into Tralee.
Yes. Very nice indeed. Yeah. Beautiful.
My room behind was such a mess. I said I had to put up one of these little backdrops in Zoom just to...
Yeah, I think it definitely lifts the mood anyway. So, yeah, very good.
It's a whole lot better than my room behind me. I'll tell you that much for now.
Yeah.
Now, we could talk for ages about being driving instructors and how we started and how we got on through our careers as driving instructors. But the people watching that don't really want to hear about that. They want to hear about how they're going to pass their driving test and the big tips to help them pass the test. So that's my first question to you. How am I going to pass my driving test, Dane?
Preparation is key. I mean, it is the big question, as you know, Sean, that you'd get asked a lot, and people would email me or in the comment section of YouTube. And the first word I would say is preparation. I would say to people in the current time anyway, just not to apply for a test unless you're an essential worker as per the guidelines. But in normal times, I would say don't apply for a cancellation unless you really need it, because you could easily get a test at very short notice. You may not have time to get lessons. You may find yourself under pressure. And I find that could be a certain reason, let's say, for a lack of success. But the key word is preparation. I think if people plan and prepare properly, they've every chance of passing their test or at least getting close and learning from the experience. So that means having a plan in place, like have your instructor called up and have the lessons booked in. Maybe even get a lesson with the instructor, a lesson or two before you apply, just to ensure that you're kind of ready or close to being ready. Like I had a lesson there this morning with a girl and she asked me, am I ready for my test then? And I said, yes, you are. And because she was a GA person, I used a GA analogy. And I know, and she was from Tip, like, so I knew she knew her hurling. So I said, just think of it like Division 1 in hurling, okay? You have Tipperary, Cork, Wexford, Waterford, Kilkenny. You're in Division 1. I'm not saying you're going to win Division 1, but you're able to compete in Division 1. You're not like Carlow or Laois down in Division 2. And that's the other thing I say to people. They ask me, are they ready for the test, for example? And I would say, yes, you're ready, but I can't guarantee you'll pass because it depends on the day. But putting a good plan in place, liaising with your instructor, not getting a cancellation unless you need it. I like when people kind of let the 3 or 4 weeks come through and we can get a lesson a week, or I like to get more lessons closer to the test date. As well as that, there's lots of reading material you can look up as well online. Like, for example, the Rules of the Road is free online. You can download it. Your great website, Sean, as well, looks really good. And Congratulations to you on that. I'd encourage anybody to check that out. Pass First Time. My own videos as well. And you can easily search for like theory and road signs as well. So it's all about putting a plan in place, linking with your instructor. And I always like to say as well, Sean, that the whole driving test and planning for the driving test, I like to think of it as a journey and not as an end destination. So I like to encourage people, like on my banner on my YouTube channel, I have like safe driving is for life, not just a driving test. Because I think if you can intertwine those, you're going to be a good safe driver and you're going to have a great chance of passing your test. So if you take a kind of a broader, more holistic approach to this thing, you're going to be more successful, I think. And it's all about planning.
You've probably answered my next question now as well into the bargain there, really. But the pass rates were published lately for Ireland, for the every county in the country. And if you were to average them out, the pass rate is still about 50%. Now, I've been a driving instructor for over 20 years, and the pass rate 20 years ago was about 50%. So you think like that with the extra, the EDT, the 12 lessons, and people taking possibly more lessons before the test, that the pass rate would increase. Why do you think the pass rate isn't increasing?
I have a theory on that, Sean, and it's a very good question, and it's a very interesting question. So you were saying there that the average is about 50%,
Yeah.
which is true. I've no reason to I wasn't 100% familiar. I thought it had come up I thought figures had come out from the RSA saying that it had come up a little bit since EDT, but I'm not really.
Slightly,
I
yeah.
wouldn't be sure.
Yeah.
But here's the thing I want people to know about this. Let's say you have people doing a test, okay? So you have 50% on average are going to pass and 50% on average are going to fail. Now, if you take, Sean, the 50% of people that are going to fail, okay, I would then divide them into 2 or 3 categories. So of that 50 that will fail, there's always going to be a certain amount of people who are just, chancing their arm, not getting enough lessons, just not at the required standard. So I would have them as kind of like, if you pardon the pun, like the kind of lost causes, if for want of a better phrase, Now, the other 50% of that 50, if you know what I mean, they're the ones who are doing their best with lessons, maybe get the appropriate lessons, do all the practice. And those are the ones then that are, you could say, unfortunate, a little bit unlucky. So I would encourage people to look at it that way. The 50% that pass, great, congratulations to them. But of the other 50 that don't pass, there's always going to be, in my opinion, a cohort there that are just kind of chancing their arm. Maybe they haven't got their tax disc up, or they're insured. I don't know if that's counted as a failure or just not like a non-test as such. But there'll always be a certain amount that will either just not do it when they're at the right time, or will chance their arm, or make perhaps unusual mistakes, or run a red light where they wouldn't normally run a red light. But I would hope that generally the standard is rising a little bit. As you said, it's a good point about the lessons. Since 2011, the learners have had to get 12 mandatory EDT lessons. So you would hope that would have a positive impact overall. But I would also like to see as well, Sean, and I'm sure you'll agree, that going forward, that we would look at what they're doing in the UK, where they have parallel parking as part of the test, bay parking, and following sat-nav directions. I would love to, if we had that on top of the EDT 12 lessons, I think we'd really, really be going places then.
Yeah, definitely. It's strange. In the UK, there's no mandatory lessons, so there's no 12 lessons.
Yeah.
But the average amount of lessons that a person takes in the UK is way higher than here. I think the average in the UK is about 47 lessons. So clearly they're taking more lessons. I suppose the cities are busier now, maybe, and they're bigger.
And I think as well, people might have a slight, maybe a bit more worry or a bit more fear about the parallel parking and the emergency stop, maybe in the parking. And I think that might kind of play in mentally, and they might kind of get extra lessons on that basis. So it's interesting. I wasn't aware actually that the lessons was so high there. That's quite interesting. And I would probably hazard a guess it could be something to do with the parallel parking. Yeah. And like more challenging maneuvers that they'd have, a more wider variety of maneuvers. Like.
Okay. What are so from that we'll say, so I mean the tip for learner drivers listening is to prepare earlier and make sure you're prepared. I mean, every driving instructor in the country who hears this will be able to identify with people coming. The analogy I use, by the way, is when somebody comes to me and they're not prepared, they have 2 days to go before their test. I tell them that it's comparable to running a marathon 2 days later and then only going into training now. It's kind of not going to work, maybe. Now, for some it does. That's the only thing for some it does, as you well know. But early prep is definitely the key. I'd agree with that 110%. Yeah. What are the most common questions? If I was to ask for maybe 2 or 3 very common questions that learner drivers come to you pre-test, what are the big questions they're asking?
Well, I find the first thing I would find is a lot of learner drivers would ask about the theory and the road signs, for example. They'd often ask me, like, what questions will they ask, or do I have to word them in an exact way, and then the road signs as well. So I'd often then email them a list of the 40 or 50 top questions and the road signs as well. They'd often ask about that. And I think sometimes people who may have dyslexia or certain learning difficulties might get a little bit more stressed about that than persons who wouldn't have any issues in that regard. Also, people would ask regularly enough, actually, on the reverse around the corner, for example. I often get asked about, do I need to indicate on the reverse around the corner? Do I need to indicate left? Now, I always said no, and I ended up talking to a tester in Wexford anyway, and he said, he just said to me, there's no rule on it. Like if they want to indicate, they can, it's no issue, but tell them not to lose any sleep over it, Dane, because it's not a big deal. Would you tell people to indicate on the reverse around the corner, Sean?
I'd agree with you. I tell them not to, but I know some instructors do, and I explain it the very same way as you did. It makes no real difference if you do.
Yeah.
What I say to people is that if you were to think about it, a car coming up behind you, it can look a little confusing if you've got the left signal on and the reverse lights are on.
Absolutely.
It's not quite sure whether you're parked or in reverse or you're coming back. Whereas if you
that's good. Yeah, that's what I'd say.
Yeah.
So, the tester was saying that they can do either. He just added as well at the end. Just make sure that they remember to indicate right moving off, because sometimes when the indicator is on and you can hear the tick tock for left, they might go into first gear then, and they might kind of do their looks and blind spot and go, and they might actually forget. I'm actually indicating left here. I have to indicate right. So he did say that. But to go back to your question, I regularly get asked that about the reverse around the corner. Also, I get asked a lot about the use of the handbrake. Do I need to use the handbrake here, there, and everywhere? And I developed a little acronym for that. I had developed this acronym a long, long time ago. It was in my early batch of lessons, probably 2016 or something. Basically, it's HALT, H-A-L-T, like halt for stop. And I would say to people then, think of those 4 letters as the first letter of the words. H for hill. A was a problem. I had to really think about A. So I came up with alighting, as in, like disembarking and letting someone out, / parking. And then L could be lights, like at traffic lights. And then T for time, if you're stopped over 4 or 5 seconds. So I would regularly get asked about using the handbrake. And at the same time, I would say to them, just visualize yourself at a stop sign, turning left. You're on a just ever so slight downhill, and you're only stopped for a moment. Just make sure you stop fully and do your appropriate looks, but there's probably no need for the handbrake there. I know some instructors say, use a handbrake or use the handbrake at every single stop sign. I don't really think that's necessary. I think the important thing is to stop a stop sign rather than use the handbrake. So people would ask me, Sean, about the theory, a little bit of concerns about the theory, what questions to get asked. As I said, the indicating on the reverse, when to use the handbrake. And occasionally I'd get asked about, like, if I'm at a stop sign and there's nothing coming, do I really need to stop, or can I just do a rolling stop? And I have to share a funny post I found with you, and I'm not claiming credit for this, because I found it on one of the Driving Instructor forums. I think it was the Facebook forums, and he said, so a learner driver asked me today, do I have to stop fully at a stop sign if there's nothing coming, or can I just kind of roll slowly through it and treat it like a yield sign, let's say? So the driving instructor answered back and said, well, think of it this way. Let's say a guard pulls you out of the car and starts beating you with his baton, like beating you really, really hard, God forbid, obviously. And the guard says, or the policeman says to you, now, do you want me to slow down or do you want me to stop? So that was a good way of putting it.
Yeah, it makes it very clear. Yeah, I mean, again.
Would you get that question as well?
Oh, very regularly, yeah. And I find that the longer people are driving, the more they're used to rolling through stop signs. And it can be very difficult to get them to stop, and it's a very regular question.
Yeah.
Here's another.
There's one more as well. There's one more as well, Sean.
Yeah.
Sorry, I just thought of it there as you were talking. A lot of people, this may even be maybe even more popular than the reverse indicator one, ask me, do I need to indicate overtaking parked cars? Mm-hmm. That comes up a lot now. And I usually have just a kind of a general rule where I say, if you feel you're going over the halfway line, or if there's no halfway line where you would think the halfway line would be, then it can be a good idea to indicate. But I would always say, just make sure you don't leave it on too long in case there's another right turn up ahead that you don't want to have it misleading. And I would always try and promote the benefit of the the quick signal where you give it a little tap and it just signals 3 times. On my Opel Corsa, it has that. So that would be another very popular question. What would be your thoughts on that?
What I always say to people, if I was to sum it up for people, I'd say, if in doubt, signal. As long as the signal doesn't confuse, I don't think there's any penalty for it, or I don't think they'd get a penalty. Yeah. But around the town, I mean, if you have a line of parked cars, and I actually did a video on my own YouTube channel about this recently, because somebody asked me, if there's a line of parked cars and there's a big gap in the middle, do I stay out or do I go back in? It's a similar thing. So I tell people, and it's true of a lot of parts of the driving test, use your common sense, but I would encourage people normally, if they felt the signal was necessary and they felt that someone would benefit from it, that they would use it. Yeah, definitely. But like it's a very unusual thing, and it's only when you talk to more driving instructors you realize all of us teach slightly differently, definitely, but a lot of driving instructors have slightly different views on everything, and it's not that any of us are wrong or right. Really, it's just different ways to look at it. And
I think that's a good point, and I'd always say that to people as well. Like I would occasionally have people that would be coming to me for lessons, and they may have had lessons from someone else in Wexford, or even coming from another county. They might have moved down from Dublin or something like that. And I always say to them, if I say something to you that's different to the previous instructor, don't worry. Like there's more than one way to skin a cat. It's not that one of us is right or one of us is wrong. It's just that sometimes there's more than one right way to do a certain thing. Yeah. And I would always explain it to them and use a diagram to say that. Sometimes both answers might be right, because every time you drive somewhere, you're going to have different people, you're going to have different hazards, you're going to have different cars on the road. So you're definitely right, though. There would be a certain variation, but for the most part, I'd say we all sing off the same hymn sheet. It's just that there might be certain little differences that is not surprising.
Yeah, the goal is the same, I think, for all instructors, because examiners, if you've noticed it down through the years, are different as well. Examiners and vary in what they penalise students for as well. And it's kind of being human, I suppose, really, more than anything else.
Exactly it. Yeah, it's good. That's a good point about the examiners, because they have their own preference. Like some examiners would be really big on progress, like driving too slow, and others on observation and stuff. Yeah.
Here's another question for you now. You'll be able to answer this, no problem. How many lessons will it take before I pass the driving test? How many lessons do I need?
Well, that is the
easy one.
$64,000 question. Yeah. And again, it's probably related to our previous point about everybody being different and everybody being unique. So person A could get, for example, the 12 EDT lessons that he or she needs, and they may only need 2 or 3 then after that. Or I've had some people who I've given the 12 lessons to. They've kept an eye on my YouTube videos, and they've actually went and passed without even coming back to me. The honest answer to that question, Sean, is probably the most common words that I write in my YouTube comments when I'm replying back to people on a comment. And that is, it depends on the situation. And I would say, to paraphrase it, it depends on the person. But I know people are probably looking for a bit more than that. So I'll give maybe a slightly more specific answer. So basically, you're going to need the 12 anyway, as we all know. And I would always say to people, even if they're at a decent standard of drive, like a natural, good, confident driver, I would always say 3 is the magic number. Because I feel that if I have 3 lessons with someone, I can do 3 more or less different routes. I can do 3 reverses, turnabouts, and hill starts, and I can get a good gauge of someone with 3 lessons. 1 is a bit tricky, 2 is better, but it's not perfect. And I always feel it, because sometimes when you have a lesson with somebody, you kind of spend the first lesson kind of getting to know them and getting to know their weaknesses and trying to find out what their concerns are. So I would say that 3 is a good number, but it does depend on the person. I find that there's a couple of different types. If I was to divide them into 2 learner drivers who are getting ready for the test, I had a girl last week who was quite good at the maneuvers. So she was really good on hill starts, quite good on turnabouts, and even on the reverse around the corner, she actually did it very, very well. There was no issue, even though she was worried about it. But her issue was the general driving, like coming to roundabouts, not slowing down enough, kind of late going down the gears, braking a bit sudden then at the line, this kind of stuff. And whereas other drivers might be kind of confident enough with the general driving, but they may have issues with the steering on the turnabout or the technique on the reverse around the corner. And that's why I said, Sean, that sometimes it's better to get at least 3, because in that first lesson, you're able to kind of find out this or that, or kind of zone in. Are they a bit tricky are they a bit weak on clutch control and blind junctions, but they might be okay with everything else. So it's a tough one. It is a tough one to answer, and I'm sure you'll agree. I'd say just to summarize it, it just depends on the person.
I find out it's tough on young learner drivers now, because a lot of them are not insured in the family car, because insurance, it's the age-old problem for young drivers. It's always been there. It's probably a bit worse now. But when they come then for lessons, a lot of them will have no experience or no driving in between the lessons and their pre-test lessons from EDT, we'll say, to pre-test. It's very tough for them because then they're trying to, in a few short lessons, make up that gap. And like I often say to people, the only thing I don't sell is a bucket of experience. You know, if I sold buckets of experience, I'd be a millionaire. Because it's the big...
It kind of reminds me of, and again, if I was to use a GAA analogy, it'd be like drivers like you described. They're like they're not junior. Like you say, a junior hurler will be like someone doing the EDT. A senior hurler would be someone doing the test. It's kind of like they're intermediate. They're better than learners. They're better than beginners, but they're just not quite at the pre-test level just yet. So I can fully understand what you mean by your description of that category of learner drivers there. Yeah,
it's very tough. It's tough.
Can be.
It's an uphill battle for them, but most of them get there in the end. Thanks be to God.
Yeah, that's the thing. And that's a good point. I mean, that's the thing. Like most of them will get there in the end. Yeah, you just have to keep plugging away.
Another question for learner drivers who are watching this. How do you pick a driving school? What tips would you give them for picking a driving school or a driving instructor? It's very important that the instructor suits them, I think, is it?
Yeah, it is. And I would always say, I think I made a video, this was one topic that came up in a recent video where I'd say, don't be afraid to kind of maybe try one lesson with one instructor, maybe another lesson with another one, and just like pay as you go, whatever it is, 35, 40, whatever people are charging, and just see how you get on. I say to people, don't be afraid to do that, because you are the customer and you have every right to do that. I would always say to people, ask around as well, like ask family, friends, who did they get, and very often word spreads around pretty quick. I would also, I mean, everybody would go to Google for these things nowadays. As a great, like Google is a fantastic resource for finding out things. So you can certainly go there, and you will be able to check out the websites of driving schools, and you'll be able to see then how they kind of present themselves, and if they have a good professional, nice website with lots of things explained and everything clearly laid out, it's probably going to reflect their personalities as well. But I would generally say ask around, word of mouth, Google, family, friends, work colleagues, Google, as the best way of doing that. Okay. Would you do something similar, Sean?
I would, yeah. I think like a car is a very confined space. It's very important that you get on with your instructor. It's very important that you feel comfortable in the car. And I think it's also very important that after every lesson you get out and you think, I learned something there, and I benefited from that. And, if people are not happy, even with the EDT, and I think it's important for students to know that. I think a lot of students believe that once they start EDT with one instructor, they have to stay with that instructor for the 12 lessons. Yeah. You don't,
Yeah, absolutely, It's important to get that message out, yeah.
It is, because not everybody's going to get on with everybody else, you know what I mean, for a number of different reasons. And I think for the people are paying a lot of money for driving lessons. And it's important that, they're reaping the benefits of them and that they're happy. You should not be, and I've heard this lately from a girl who came to me for lessons. She dreaded going for her driving lessons, she told me. And I thought, in this day and age, look, that can't be right. It's not right. So look, I mean, if you're not happy, look around. You don't have to stick with the same instructor for the EDT, and move around until you are. And you know,
because if you're not happy, like that girl you mentioned there, if you're not happy, or you're anxious, or you're worried going to the driving lessons, you're mentally, you're probably not in the right state to learn things. No. And that girl probably wouldn't feel comfortable asking questions to the instructor and so on and so forth. So your own learning, the driver's learning will suffer if they're not enjoying the lessons, if they find them tough going, or if there's a kind of a lack of communication, let's say. Yeah.
Listen, nearly time to wrap up. I want to talk about automatic driving before we go any further, or before we finish up. It's coming in slowly but surely. All the hybrid cars now, like somebody said to me lately, I said, what do you think of automatic cars? And he said, no, I think the next car I'll buy is a hybrid. But most people don't realize that all hybrids are automatic. It's par for the course. Electric cars are all going to be automatic. And we whether people like it or not, over the next couple of years, you won't be able to buy manual cars anymore. They're going to phase them all out so that all cars are going to be hybrids, electrics, by default, automatics. How long? It's a tough question because you have people coming for lessons now who are talking about using an automatic car, or maybe want to do their EDTs in automatics. What kind of thoughts would you have for them?
Well, I'd be echoing what you said there. Like, automatics are definitely on the way and are going to become more widespread, without a doubt. And I think that's good in the long run. It'll make my videos on gears and clutch pretty much redundant anyway for a while. So I'll have to start doing more videos on park and drive and all that kind of stuff. But I'm up for that challenge anyway. So I definitely think it's coming. I think it'll probably improve standards, because I think it can only be good because people, when they're learning, may not have the same insecurities and hang-ups about clutch and gears and coasting and so on and so forth. So they may have more confidence in learning to drive. They may progress quicker because they don't have to worry about clutch and gears and all that kind of stuff, especially for somebody who might not be as coordinated. And so I think that'll be a positive thing. And I think, what you said is very, very, very true there, very prophetic as well, Sean. At the start, you said it's happening, and it could happen like very, very quickly, in the same way as it's very hard to find a small diesel car now. And I think people could be surprised by how quickly it could happen. And I think, and I'm no expert on engineering, I would always watch the news if something came up about automatic cars or auto drive cars, or self-drive cars, sorry, is the word I'm looking for. I think when we finally get all the charging stations up around the country, and when we finally have automatic cars that are automatic electric cars that can, do a trip to Dublin and back, or Belfast and back, or Dingle and back, then you'll have people having more confidence in them. And when people have more confidence in something and the demand is there, that's when your prediction will come very, very true, where it could happen like in a waterfall. So it is happening, as you said. I'll be honest with you, I don't do as many lessons as I used to the last few years, because I'm kind of focused on a few other things, but I would do the lessons. And I haven't had that many automatics. I had one there late last year, but not a whole lot. But I can definitely see it coming in. It's the way things are going, and as I said, it could happen a lot quicker, a lot more dramatically than people think. Yeah,
I think it will. Let's take it one step further, so and make us totally unemployed as driving instructors. The driverless car. There's driverless taxis in America already, apparently, and in China, it's just an app in your phone, and the taxi arrives. There's not a sinner inside in it. Are we going to be unemployed?
I don't know. We could be. You hear news reports now of factories closing down, or factories laying off people because everything has gone automated. My only hope, Sean, is that even though it will be automated, or self-driving cars will be automated, obviously, that maybe that people will still have to be able to drive the car in case something malfunctions with the technology, that you'll still have to get in and drive it. That might be our only hope, but it could be a tricky road to go down. Yeah, we might be unemployed in not too distant future.
Hopefully not, Dane. Hopefully not. Yeah. Listen, before we go, it's been great. Thank you very much, by the way, for doing this. I should say it's, for both of us, it's our first time doing a Zoom interview.
That's right. I have used Skype many times, but this is definitely a first for Zoom, and I've heard all about Zoom on during lockdown. So it's a first for me. Yeah.
I'm keeping everything crossed that it all ends up okay when I start the recording, and it'll be fine. Listen, one last tip for the young learner drivers of Ireland who are preparing for their driving test. If you were to sum it up in one sentence, how are they going to pass? And we leave it at that then.
I would say to think of driving as a marathon, not a sprint. To encourage drivers, young and old, that it's all about the journey rather than the destination. And always remember that if you can be a good, safe driver for life, you're going to pass the test anyway. So if you have the philosophy that coasting is bad because it can cause the car to go faster down the hill, and it can cause you to brake harder, and it could cause the car to wear down a little bit more. So if you have that idea that coasting, just to use coasting as an example, Sean, that coasting is bad for driving, generally for the environment, for everything, as well as being bad for the driving test. I think that to me is what motivates me to do the videos, to be a driving instructor. And that is that good, safe driving is for life, not just a test.
Okay. Well, that's another video I'd like to do, actually, maybe sometime in the future, hopefully, is about your backstory, about the videos, because like I say, personally, anyway, I'd like to hear that. And I have a funny feeling a lot of people watching might like to hear it as well. You have other videos, YouTube channels that we might talk about and stuff like that. So hopefully we'll get back and do that maybe in a couple of weeks' time if you're up for it.
Yes, absolutely, Sean. I'll be happy to do that.
Brilliant. Check out Dane's YouTube channel, Dane Tyghe. Again, I'm not going to ask you where the name came from. We'll save that for the next video as well. It'll be a good one. But check out Dane's. All you have to do is Google driving test in Ireland and his channel will come up anyway. Listen, thanks very much again, Dane. It's been a real pleasure. And hopefully we'll talk again in the next couple of weeks.
Sounds good. Thanks for having me, Sean. It was a pleasure.